Well, welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Finally, the Finance Minister presented what he calls his stimulus package or the economic recovery program that should help turn around the economy, as he did present the mid-year review of estimates and the supplementary budget. But would this statement, with those measures, bring about the required economic recovery, or what the minority is describing as a political manifesto? Well, on PM Express Business Edition, you're going to look at this. Is this really going to help fast-track the economic recovery, turn it around, or maybe we are just borrowing too much, or talking about programs that really this government might not be or may be in office to implement those measures? This is PM Express Business Edition. Let's do a wrap, or let's bring you some highlights of the issues that the Finance Minister spoke about when he went to Parliament today to highlight the issues. So those PowerPoint presentations will give you a fair idea in terms of what the minister spoke about in terms of his plan for the economy, expenditure, revenue. And so looking at all these things, do you think that indeed recovery is near? Or maybe some are saying that you're borrowing too much, and some are describing it as a political manifesto. Remember that you can also send your views and comments via our various social media platform that is on JoyNews on TV, on Facebook, and on Twitter as well. And I'll gladly share with my guest or my distinguished guest on this program this evening. Kesla Tuforsen is the minority spokesperson on finance. We'll get his comment for you. Kweku Kwating is Deputy Minister of Finance. Gov't Bobkin, he is actually economist and also from industry, Chief Executive Association of Ghana Industry, Seth Shumakwabwa. The politicians, the MPs, and the economists and industry members, thank you so much for joining us on PM Express Business Edition. Mr. Kweku Kwating, let me first start with you. I mean, how would you see this presentation?
Well, of course, as the commentary has been since the budget was, the media review and supplementary budget were presented to Parliament. The presentation was good, and I think what is refreshing about what we presented is that if you look at the global figures, for instance, for the deficit, we're beginning to project on the average 13.9% of GDP deficit across the world. For Ghana, we're doing 11.4. Debt to GDP by 101.5%. As the world average, Ghana is projecting to do some at the maximum 76% of GDP. I mean, this will tell you that even though Ghana is getting good compliments from international sources for the way we have managed COVID-19, we have been able to do so with prudence, giving us figures that compare very favorably with international trends. I think that is positive.
Positive for you, but some are saying that if I look at the expenditures, some are saying that aren't you using COVID-19 as an excuse just to spend more?
The question is to spend more on what? The president has just made the point that COVID has exposed to us the inadequacy of our health facilities, and has therefore commissioned the Agenda 111 to put up regional and district hospitals. Government is saying that businesses have been distressed. And so for the next 3 months for water and for up to the close of the year, lifeline consumers. And when I say businesses, I'm talking about our petty businesses as well. And so you commit some money to that. You are having to quarantine people because you want to protect our people against the virus. If people say the expenditures are wrong and we're just spending, I want them to provide alternative expenditures, that you should not have done this, you should do this instead, that cut this and do this. Then we can engage. And government, we're not perfect. If we have constructive suggestions, we are happy to consider them and to see which ones we can use to fine-tune what we ourselves are doing. But to say, without telling me which of the expenditures to support COVID-19, be it the relief to health workers, be it what we're spending to put up facilities, if you're not telling me that those expenditures are wrong, and yet you are happy to just summarize the figures and to say they are big when they are far better than international averages, it becomes very hard to take on board such engagement.
Now, Mr. Kwasi, let me pick you on one expenditure. In terms of providing cooked meals for the less privileged in society for just about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, 54 million Ghana cedis. That is why people are worried.
Well, the Ministry of Finance, we identify with that question. Remember, when government has decided, we have a responsibility to ensure that we provide the money. There are agencies that work with this money. We are happy to join anybody that says we want accountability on these expenditures. The Auditor General should do the audit. When that has been done, we are happy to engage. And Ministry of Finance, I can repeat this, we are concerned about how the money that we are instructed by government to send to those who really spend these monies, how those monies are spent. So I have no question about that, except to say that it is entirely possible to look at figures without knowing the content of what has been done. And before the people who have the expertise, the auditors have gone to audit and brought your report, to start giving the impression that somehow you have done your audit already and you're very sure that it was either too much expenditure. I don't think it's proper. And if you ask me whether it is too much, what I can say to you is that we would all wait patiently for the audit of these expenditures, and then we can discuss the outcomes. If people have not used the money well, of course, we would have to address those matters. But please don't, before that has been done, give the impression that you have done your audit and you can say confidently that something was not spent right. I think they have done their best. The workers who were providing these reliefs have done extremely well. And at this point, we should be encouraging them rather than giving the impression that the work they have done is inadequate when we ourselves do not have any scientific basis for doing so.
But Honorable Kwasi, what stopped the Finance Minister today from giving us a breakdown of how this was done, even though whilst we are waiting for the audit from the Auditor General?
Well, nothing may have stopped the finance minister, but several figures were mentioned in this media review and supplementary budget. And for each of those figures, somebody could ask for a breakdown, as you are doing. You don't give the impression that you are the only person that would have concern. Somebody would have concern about a lot of things. And so what I'm saying to you is that if you need a breakdown, you ask for it.
Okay.
If we will provide you with what we have, I do not think that in itself would address the key issue you raised. I think that people who have the expertise and who are paid to do so must go and audit the expenditures and tell us what they have found. But before that, let us commend people who have done well. Ghana is being said to have managed this COVID-19 so well. I do not think it was the exceptional making of those we politicians. It is ordinary people down there who have made this happen. And let's not be saying things that demoralizes them without a basis to do so.
Honorable, all what we are pushing for is more of fiscal prudence and more of like this some accountability. So let me ask you again that when will this?
Maybe we should move on from. I agree with you, except to say that let's have a scientific basis for doing so. If you want breakdown, let's ask for it.
Okay.
Let's not say things in a way that would give the wrong impression.
Not at all. So are there any timelines where, for instance, if I want the breakdown, I can get access to it maybe in a week time or maybe in 2 weeks time?
You, as I said, there are several figures in the budget. For those ones that you want breakdown for,
Gov't spending. Gov't spending.
Well, Gov't spend, when we went to Parliament, I think we gave a breakdown of how the coronavirus alleviation program. The breakdown is very clear. I can read it out to you again, but we laid it in Parliament. It's in public domain. If you want further breakdown of the items that we listed for Parliament, we will give you where we have it. If we have to go to the spending agencies, we will do that for you. But I want you to be asking those questions and getting the feedback before you make up your mind.
Okay. Honorable Kwekukwatin, hold on. Let me bring in Godfrey Bobkin. He is an economist as well. I know he's been following this budget presentation all along. Mr. Bobkin, you followed the presentation, and what do you make of it?
Well, it's an interesting document. I'm saying it's an interesting because it is very obvious government set out to kill two birds with one stone. They have the election in mind. And of course, like the political economy, once you are in possession of good news, you would want to show at any given opportunity and all of that. But I think that the media review is very, very comprehensive. And I think since the statement that the Finance Ministry made in Parliament on the 30th of March, this is the most comprehensive assessment from government in terms of the impact of COVID-19, and then also in terms of the strategies, mitigation measures that they have put in place. And to that extent, it offers a lot for stakeholders. And I believe that it's something that has been missing in the past 3 months or so, and in terms of direction. And then so private sector can also feed in, but that has been provided largely. So if you look at I want to go straight to the numbers.
Yeah.
You look at the impact on our revenue envelope. You look at the variance, that is very huge. Then again, when you look at the expenditure side, it's quite a lot. Look at compensation for employees, a little above 27 billion cedis. Look at that of interest payment, also very huge. Now, my concern is this. Then when you look at those two tables, and then you juxtapose that within the broader context of the strategy mitigation measures, the question is, are we in a position to translate this beautiful document strategy into actuals that benefit Ghanaians? I think the answer is no. Why am I saying so? if you look at compensation of employees alone and then interest payments, there's nothing left in terms of the revenue side where we have control, practically. So the question is, how do you finance that strategy? Where are you going to get the financing from? Then again, you are looking at your debt position, where it is right now. Okay, and then you are looking at your interest payments. You are looking at the fact that the international capital market is practically on hold. Okay, so to that extent, it raises some concerns about whether we'll be able to mobilize the much needed financing to translate the strategy into actual, to make it a bit broad-based. This is my concern. And why am I saying so? Since independence, when you look at Ghana, we do so well in coming out with beautiful documents like this. You can talk about Vision 2020 that is supposed to end this year, and all of that. We haven't had a problem with that at all as a country, and all of that. But the question is the implementation strategy and mobilizing the necessary resources at the least cost to translate that to actual. That has eluded us. Why am I saying so? In the last 3.5 years or so, you realize that against all that the government talked about raising more revenue and all of that, we have not done quite well. If you look at our tax efforts, okay, we are still doing far below our peers. Our peers are doing between 18 and 20%. We are still doing less than 13%. That is a big challenge for us that we need to be able to deal with. When you find a country with this table, where every city tax revenue within your control, just 2 line items take virtually everything, the question is, where are you heading? How far can you go? That is a challenge right now. So to that extent, you realize that, but of course, because these are COVID times, it's very difficult to criticize government in isolation without looking at it within the global context, the regional context, and all of that in terms of the impact of COVID-19. So government might have found a good place to hide and all of that. But of course, the impact is very real. It's very real, and it cuts across and all of that. But oftentimes, to what extent can the ordinary Ghanaian on the street associate with these developments? To what extent can they say that they have been carried along with all the good things and all of that? I think we are not there yet. The critical problem, I think, policymakers in Ghana and implementers we are facing right now is how do we translate these macro level gains to the level where the ordinary Ghanaian can associate with. Okay, so of course we have seen growth, but of course all that has been reversed now. If you look at the GDP revised 0.9%, and all of that, really, of course, that also tells you that less input will be needed to produce less output like we find it right now.
Prof, you've made a very critical point in your submission, the bit about the debt stock and all the rest. I'll be going to the chief executive of AJS, Chuma Kobwa, to see whether industries are quite excited by this. And also come back to Kukwa thing, revenue is its play. It looks like it's a big challenge. Let's pick the thoughts actually of Kesla Tuforson. He's the minority spokesperson on finance. Where I engaged him earlier today, his concerns has to do with the debt stock. Here, the minority spokesperson on finance, Kesla Tuforson, and you've gone through, you've heard the minister speak. It looks like you have some serious concerns about the plan expenditure and the fact that it's going to. But why are you concerned?
I'm worried as a Ghanaian in the first place, and there are reasons to do it. All over the world, I mean, when you encounter emergency, you first of all reprioritize your budget. You look at the resource envelope, obviously to be constrained in an emergency, to the extent that you have reduced expenditure, you reduce revenue, and you have to obviously respond accordingly, the expenditure line. If you were to look at the expenditure side, clearly you will notice that the government is spending more, yet revenue is coming down, and that is a major concern. Then I want to look at what are they spending the money on? Okay. Are they emergency related? only for us to be told that today they are going to spend approximately 11.1 billion Ghana cedis on the coronavirus itself, without giving us justification in detail. 11.1 billion Ghana cedis. Coronavirus direct expenditure, I believe that we need some background expenditure. And you recall that we have constantly raised questions and asked the Auditor General to audit and give us indication, because in Parliament we do not have the indication. But even far from that, this act of failing to align the shortfall in revenue to the shortfall to expenditure has negative consequences on the economy, to the extent that it's going to alleviate public debt. I wasn't surprised when the minister announced that the public debt has increased from 120 billion to 255 billion in 3.5 years, as at June 2020. If you were to look at the budget statement again, and now let me point you, since you have an eye to look at some of these concerns, you will notice that from the financing side, from Appendix 3A, the financing side, this administration intends to borrow 25.1 billion, okay, for the fiscal year 2020, net borrowing, addition to the public debt. My major concern is that the original budget had said that you are going to borrow 18.8 billion. The revised budget is, you are saying that you're going to borrow 44 billion Ghana cedis. It means an addition of 12.1 billion Ghana cedis. In spite of that, if you were to look at the breakdown where the borrowings are going to come from, I'm particularly worried about the fact that the borrowings are actually coming from the domestic. From domestic, you are increasing domestic debt by 16.2 billion. In fact, the original budget has said the domestic borrowing will be 15.8. Now you are saying it's going to be 32.
Oh, no, but is a concern about the accountability, or the fact that the quantum of expenditure or the amount? Because if you look at globally, COVID-19 has, let's say, even the German Chancellor is saying that, has thrown questions about fiscal prudence and deficit to the back door. Let me come in. And then that's something that, looking at the challenge that we have right now, do you think that the question and the concerns about fiscal prudence and even deficit still stands when you have to spend to save the economy and save lives?
It does. It does. There are two concerns. One on the accountability bit, and I've said that 11.1 billion, we need some accountability. We need to have accountability. That is one. Number two, countries that are observing fiscal prudence around times like this, and the fact that you raise the other countries are saying the fiscal prudence doesn't really matter. It does matter, and others are doing it. You see, it does matter, and others are doing it. I'll tell you how they are doing it. First of all, you have to reprioritize your budget. So you look at the existing budget that you drew, okay, and then see what you can cut and what you perfectly believe that you can cut, and things that you can do in a form of stimulus. So I want to look at the budget. First of all, look at what has changed from the original budget to the current budget. Clearly, from the expenditure side, I do not see the minister prioritizing anything, and that's a major worry. Everything stands the same, and you can look at from the expenditure side. If you look at the money, nothing is changing. From the capital expenditure side, you could and find a way and actually balance it from the other side, but I'm not seeing that. That's a major concern. And number two, his act is actually elevating the public debt. And public debt, you and I knows, it has some consequences, major consequences on interest payment, to the extent that in future, from 2021, a huge chunk of our money will be used for the purposes of servicing debt, to the extent that you have very little to grow the economy. So what they are doing has a negative repercussion on the economy.
Is the economy not expanding to absorb this? If you look at the projections by several, World Bank, IMF, Moody's, their projections show that things might pick up in the next 3 to 2 years or even 5 years in terms of the long-term projection.
Okay, let me tell you, unfortunately, I don't see that. This economy is near recession.
Yeah.
The government is projecting that they are going to, the overall GDP for the year 2020 will be 0.9%. Okay? In fact, if you were to look at some of the numbers, it scares me. No, GDP.
What about
the next year, they are projecting 4.7.
That is
okay.
Looking at the size of our economy.
Chief, look, it is not.
4.7 for the size of our economy.
It is not.
From 1% to 4%.
On the back of oil, they are projecting that oil is going to move from a negative 7.7% to a positive 13.7%. So the growth that they are talking about is on the back of oil. Nobody knows what is going to happen.
The base of our economy now, moving from under 1% to 4%, that is quite significant.
It's been done over the years.
I know, but isn't that significant to absorb these debts?
I do not see that. I do not see that to absorb that debt. You are going to have a public debt in excess of 74, 75, or possible 76% by end of the year 2020. And you think it will take you 1 year to bring it to sustainable levels? No.
What are your major concerns? Apart from the bit about the fiscal prudence that you're worried about, what other things are you concerned about? What is the media thing that he's put out?
An example, another one is the fact that he mentioned that they are going to launch $100 million, $100 billion recovery program. You can't just come and throw numbers.
It's not necessary.
No, I haven't said it's not necessary. You can't just come and throw numbers about. This is Parliament. Tell us where you are going to get the money to fund this.
Wouldn't the details be provided later? These are just headline information.
This is going to, again, this what about. This is going to happen in the year 2021 to 2023. This administration does not have the mandate between 2021 to 2023 as we speak. They do not have the mandate on the people. Nobody knows who is going to be the next government for him to come to Parliament and announce that. So it is just a manifesto promise, and it has no way. It shouldn't have a place in this media review. Because this media review actually you're reviewing the existing budget and the program that actually ends it.
Needless, if Arthur Forson is the next finance minister, would you do that in terms of recovering the... Would you do that
as we speak? Does anybody knows the NDC's recovery program?
We don't know about it. So maybe you might be in a position to tell it.
Until you get to know about it, which is coming soon, you cannot draw conclusions on that.
So I would come quickly to Kweku Kwarteng, the concerns that was raised by Arthur Forson, and then I'll go back to the Chief Executive of AGI to get his concerns in terms of businesses. Mr. Kweku Kwarteng, what do you make of the concerns raised by Arthur Forson? It's more of a political manifesto than an economic recovery program.
So, indeed, as I listened to Arthur, I rather saw political campaigning rather than a constructive engagement with the economic management strategies that we presented to Parliament. First, he keeps saying that whilst revenue is coming down, our expenditures are going up. And ordinarily, you can say that. But these are different times. And the reasons revenues are coming down are known. Even in the past, when revenue underperformed, it did not underperform by the margins that we have seen this time. And it is so because businesses are down, customs duties are down because imports have reduced significantly, and so revenues are down. But should a government say that because revenues are down, the things that ought to be done to cushion Ghanaians against the pandemic will not be done, and that we would not protect the citizenry because we want to pursue some fiscal prudence? No. And I think, again, when you're in opposition, it's very easy to say these things, and you just say them and you get away with them.
Because you did the same whilst in opposition, maybe?
Well, that is not a point. I mean, it's a question of, is it helpful? Whether we did it in opposition or not, at this point, is it helpful to do that? My response to him is that, as has happened in every other country, yes, revenues for almost every economy have gone down, understandably. At the same time, the expenditures for every single economy have gone up. And I just showed you what the IMF is projecting as the deficit across global economies. The average deficit is 13.9. Why is that? Because in all these economies, revenues are coming down, but expenditures have to go up because you need to protect your citizenry. You cannot allow them to suffer the effects of the pandemic. You cannot allow them to die.
Mr. Watson, let me just do a quick consent from...
So my simple response to him is that the philosophy that says when expenditure goes down, you must make sure that when revenue goes down, you must make sure that expenditure follows suit. It's not real. It's not applicable in the light of COVID-19. First point, borrowing too much. So when the expenditures are, your revenues are down, but you need to deliver these expenditures. You need to quarantine people. You need to provide relief. You need to provide facilities for isolation. You need to test your people. You need to do all those things. Where will the money come from? In the short run, that money has to be borrowed so that when things normalize, you pursue strategies to raise money, to pay off the gap, and to get your economy back on track. That is what every economy has done, and that is what we are also doing. The last point, quickly. He says the medium-term plan spreads from, especially the revitalization program that we announced, is from 2021 to about 2023. And so nobody knows who will win the next election. So as a country, as a government, we should just focus this year because nobody knows who would be the leader next year. Now, I think that is a very bad view to hold, that a government must plan longer term and hope that to the extent that the plan is reasonable, subsequent government will follow the plan. I do not think the NDC will come to power in 2021, but even if they did, it is up to them to look at what we have set into motion to see what ways it could be tweaked to deliver better outcomes if they feel so. But to say that we shouldn't draw medium-term plans because we have an election at the end of the year is completely not on. Now, my last point to Gov't. You know, Gov't, he raised a legitimate point that I think any observer will raise. I probably would have raised saying that, yes, beautiful strategies, you want to do this for your people, but we are not too sure where the money is coming from. And the likelihood is that they will not be delivered. My response is, look, COVID should teach all of us new ways of doing things. I do not think a people can say that we have tried this in the past a couple of times, we were unsuccessful, so we stopped trying, we stopped planning, we stopped dreaming big. I would rather have these strategies in the light of COVID in place to say, we will do it. Let us see why in the past we were not able to raise the revenues, as you said, even though I think our revenue mobilization program is on course. It will take time. The expectation that somehow within a year or two, you can turn your revenue landscape around when there are entrenched things to reform. We will have to have patience for the revenue reforms. I'm sure they would deliver. But the basic point I'm making, Gov't, is that, yes, when I listen to you, it puts greater burden on us that people have become pessimistic because of what has happened in the past, not necessarily under this administration, including Gov't. Therefore, this time round, we need to make it work. That is what I pick for what you're saying. I want to carry you along and to say, whatever the past has been, given COVID-19, we have to begin to do things differently, and this is government's understanding of the future.
Honorable Kwarteng, thank you so much. I will be going to the Chief Executive Association of Ghana Industries, Sechuma Kobwa. When we return shortly after this break, let's see what industries, businesses make of this mid-year review and the supplementary budget. Are they convinced by what you've said, or maybe they have their genuine concerns? We'll be right back after this break. It's PM Express Business Edition as you look at the 2020 mid-year review of estimates and the supplementary budget. Will it bring about the much talked about economic recovery, or what the minority is describing as a political manifesto? I have the Deputy Minister of Finance, I have Gov't. He is an economist, and I have the Chief Executive of the Association of Ghana Industries, Sechum Akobwa. Mr. Akobwa, from the perspective of industries, are you excited or cautiously optimistic, or whether we look forward to see whether this will come to pass, or whether indeed it's in for businesses?
Well, thank you very much, George. Thank you very much. Well, for us, we recognize one thing. First, the fact that government has recognized the challenges and the impact that the COVID has had on the industry is very important to us. So it wasn't as sounding as if we were just making noise, but we're actually telling the truth that indeed businesses and industries have been severely affected. And this is reflected in government's own statement that growth rate that was projected at 6.8 by the end of the year now is being projected below 1%. So clearly, the COVID had a very serious negative impact. One other area that industry is always concerned when it comes to management of the economy is the macroeconomic environment that we operate in. And I remember at the end of last year, we had very good indicators. Inflation was within reasonable range of about averagely 7.9% or so. Policy rates, we were talking about 16%. Exchange rate wasn't too bad in terms of the cedi fluctuations. So we were having good, macroeconomic indicators. Now, this year, the COVID had happened, and going to the end of the year, we don't know what the situation is going to be like. But the presentation didn't indicate anything otherwise. It didn't indicate that we are going to have further challenges in the macroeconomic environment. So we want to believe that it will be reasonably stable as we go along. But of course, the challenges in the economy is clear. The fact that government's own expenditure and revenue has been severely affected will have a negative impact on the private sector. Now, having recognized the challenges and the impacts, what were we expecting to see in the midterm budget review? One is more of the stimulus package. What do we do to stimulate the industries? Because government talked a lot about job creation and employment. And I think that is critical to government, is critical to every one of us. And for you to sustain jobs, you really need to have your industries running. And therefore, the idea of stimulating the economy through some of these interventions were very critical to industry, and we're very expectant on it. Well, we are aware of the 600 million that was initially announced and later increased to 1 billion with the idea that the banks would intervene. And then subsequently, I think it's been increased by about 150 to cover the creative industry and the universities and all that. That is all positive. But I must say that that is more for the very small enterprises. I was saving for the lower end of the small to the micro enterprises, not so much the medium and the large scale companies. So as far as that stimulus package is concerned, it will not have much impact at the big company level. So we were expecting something bigger at our end. We had the announcement of about 2 billion or so arrangement to support industry and businesses. But it is coming in the form of a guarantee fund. Here, it is a positive development. We welcome it, but we need to interrogate it further. We need to discuss with government quickly what and how this is going to be managed. Because normally guarantee fund means that it's not government putting the money up front. It will mean that you are going to work with, say, the banks to on-lend, but then in case of default, then the government will come in. Of course, that encourages the banks to lend. And therefore, that package, that arrangement would stimulate banking arrangement for businesses. But there's a lot more to be discussed, because at what interest rate would the bank give the facility? And is it going to be 100% cover? If it's 100% cover, then the risk level is not so much on the banks, and therefore they become more flexible. If it is not 100% cover, then it means that the banks have some risk to bear. And once banks have risk to bear, you must bear in mind that they would subject any application to their normal appraisal process. And what does that mean? It will take, it will take a long time. And this is a crisis period. We need to stimulate the economy. We need the business to survive, to create the jobs that we need. So we will have to interrogate that a little bit and discuss with government. The details have not been given yet. So it's a welcome development, but there's a lot to be discussed to be double sure of the form and nature that is going to take and the modalities for working around it. There was also, I think, another positive thing that was mentioned was the reduction in the communication tax from 9% to 5%. Yes, that is also going to have some impact because everybody's using electronic means to communicate and doing business and all that. So any reduction in cost is going to be positive. Again, let's see how it will translate into actual reduction in the cost of communication. It's a tax reduction, but it does not mean that it may impact so positively or in a big way. It all depends on how the numbers works out. So generally speaking, we are okay with the kind of presentation that has been made, but we cannot be so excited until we discuss the full details and know exactly how it's going to impact. And then also government's own plans. Government has projected some expenditure. And we keep saying that for you to support the private sector, there are specific interventions you need to do. For example, contractors and suppliers of various products to government institutions are still outstanding. That alone can be a strategy to boost industry. We know those who supply to the electricity providers, the ECG, VRA, and the rest, they are owed so heavily. If government can at least improve the repayment of the debt that is owed to these companies, it will stimulate the economy. So there are so many ways to look at it. Of course, we can't have all these details in the budget, but going forward and further discussions, we'd like to see how all these are placed in order to push industries.
Mr. Kobwa, quickly, do I get from you that the 1.2 billion is not enough? Because if small businesses had almost $1 billion, industries 1.2 is not enough in terms of stimulate.
I didn't get the impression that the 1.2 billion is separate from the small enterprise 1 billion, because what I heard was that 1.2 billion, the 600 million that has been mentioned is already part of the 1.2 billion. Maybe the minister can clarify that.
Okay.
But then even the 600, it was already announced that they would work with them banks to make it 1 billion. So it means 1 billion has already been pledged. And therefore, the only additional one I see immediately is the 150 or so. And that's probably what is coming to the 1.2 billion. So I'm not too sure if there has been special 1.2 billion earmarked for medium to large scale companies. Okay.
I'll come back to you quickly on your thoughts on the unemployment benefit or scheme or program. But let me move to Gov't. For you as an economist, as an analyst, again, looking at this whole document, the measures, what is your biggest fear and concern going into the next half of this year?
Look, George, the COVID-19 situation is so fluid that even since the beginning of this year, the IMF, the World Bank have revised their projections more than 3 times. Yeah. Because things can suddenly change next week and all of that. And therefore, we still have to continue to monitor the development. And we still have to be very prudent with spending and seek greater value for money with the limited resources that we have. Okay, so, because it's COVID-19, you can't be so hard on your government in times like this, in crisis moment like this, when they are trying to save lives and then preserve livelihood and all of that.
But Prof. Bokin, some will say that we have to finance this deficit.
Yes. I mean, look, George, whether we like it or not, the real challenge right now is mobilizing the much needed financing. If government had the money, they would do a lot more. Look at what Europe has done because they have the money. Look at what US is doing because they have the money. Our problem in this country is because of high expenditure and our inability to collect the much needed tax revenue to reflect even our own economic standing in terms of our tax effort and benchmark that with our peers, we don't have that space. So even when government means very well, it's very difficult to translate that into actual. This is our challenge. Okay, and therefore, we cannot substitute good intentions as we see it in this document for accomplishment. No, there are good intentions in this document, but that is not the end of it. And then when I say that we have our own doubts, I'm sure Honorable would agree with me that if you look at the budget variance over the years, and you look at what we say we'll do and what we have been able to do, even in normal times, when we had a fairly degree of control over the assumptions underlying the budget, it turned out to be something else. But here we are in a different situation where we don't even have control over the assumptions underlying the budget. And that is the reason why the 2020 budget, barely 2 months into the implementation of the budget year, implementation of the budget, all the assumptions were no longer valid, and therefore every projection had to be thrown overboard. And that is how come we are talking about GDP growth of 0.9% now, whilst a couple of months ago, November 2019, we were talking about 6.8%. I take it from this discussion that the Honorable Deputy Minister is assuring us that things are going to be done differently. Okay, and to that extent, I would say I'll go to bed with some level of excitement.
All right.
But if we go do the same thing the way we've done it in the time past, then we have to be unique to expect a different outcome. But let me also say this, that beyond what government will be able to mobilize here, it is clear from the impact of COVID-19 that Africa will not be able to finance the growth recovery strategy from its own domestic resources. That is all. So some level of external assistance from the G20, from the IMF and the World Bank will certainly be needful. And I believe the ministry will be working together with other African finance ministers to push that global agenda also. More importantly, how do we get the kind of external financing at such a lower rate that developed countries like the US and Germany have been getting? Because they borrow at less than 1%, and we go and borrow at more than 8%. With that kind of structure, it's impossible to make it. It will be as difficult as asking fish to climb a tree.
Well, Prof, okay, we'll take a short break. When I get back, I'll do a quick one with AG and then let the finance minister have the final word. This is PM Express Business Edition. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition. Let me do a quick comment on Facebook, and I'll come to Deputy Minister of Finance. And Achudela says, good evening. Today's mid-year budget mount the campaign and the manifesto platform for the NPP party. That's his comment. Next one, Erickson says, ABBA, 135 billion in less than 4 years. So he lists some of the things there. So what at all have we used these monies for? And Joseph Dakora says, well, government cannot avoid spending. We see some to be spending in areas that have not productive potential. We are wastefully fumigating every corner without any proof to show the fumigation has been beneficial. Yeah, so those are the comments there. I hope I've been able to capture all of them. So, Mr. Kokukating, for you, are you that optimistic that these policies that you've outlined will really bring about or fast-track the economic recovery? Zukwatini, if you can hear me, I'm talking about the fact that whether these measures, you are that optimistic that they will bring about the required recovery the next half of the year and even going into next year, if you are in power? Well,
George, my response to you is that we have no choice. We have no other alternative. When I listen to Gov't, I kind of agree with him. I know where he's coming from. But what we need to ask ourselves is, and so what do we do? Do we rely on the past and to say, look, let's not bother because this is how it's always going to be? Okay. Or do we push ahead? So when you ask me whether I'm optimistic, I have no choice but to be optimistic. That is the only, for me, credible posture a government and perhaps we citizens can adopt going forward. I mean, some of the points such as there has to be some kind of engagement with our colleagues in Africa and the third world to find a way of getting some kind of subsidy from the developed world in financing our recovery program. Of course, I will be happy to collaborate with our sisters across the continent and elsewhere.
Mr. Kwarteng, sorry I need to step in, but because of time, in 30 seconds again, wrapping up for us about the quick recovery and your optimism, please.
Okay, so the point I'm making is that experience has shown us that we can only rely on ourselves. That's what experience teaches us, that we can only rely on ourselves. And as COVID has woken us to the reality that our systems needs boosting, perhaps it's time to also change ourselves.
Okay.
I am as impatient as anybody could be about our inability to do things we have planned in the past. But I keep saying that our only option is to be optimistic about the future and apply ourselves to it.
Mr. Kwarteng, thank you so much. Sorry, time is not our best friend, even though this is getting quite interesting. Sorry, other guests, we have to draw the curtain down. Thank you so much, Godfrey Bobkin. Thank you so much, Chief Executive of AGI, Sir Chuma Kwabwa, and also the Deputy